Hey, this is Brooks with Character Design Forge. Even if you've never heard of the term chibi before, you've absolutely seen a chibi character. Now, chibi, of course, is a combination of the words chubby and iddle whittle. Actually, it's just small in Japanese, but it's a term that's come to refer to a specific style and set of proportions in character design, sometimes called super deformed, although you wouldn't expect something referred to as deformed to turn out so cute. This chibi style is most notably found in anime, but it's been appropriated everywhere. Now, if you're interested in making chibi characters of your own, we're going to go over some criteria on what makes a character chibi, look at some examples of what is and isn't chibi, and finally run through the creation of a chibi character and talk about adapting existing characters into the chibi style. The amount of times I almost said chili. The first thing to keep in mind when making chibi characters is that they are essentially infants or toddlers. Now, your character may not even be young, but the chibi proportions are very similar to those of a very young child's. Now, the rules that I break down in this video are actually just principles. They aren't laws. They're what I feel subjectively make or break the chibi form. You can take these things, run with them, and change them as you'd like. But I think you'd be hard-pressed not to consider our first rule, which is about the size of the head. See, as we grow, our head stays relatively the same size while our body gets much larger, which means that proportionally, our heads are never bigger than when we're babies. Chibi characters exaggerate this, which is why rule number 1 is to make the rest of the body roughly the same height as the head, or at least no taller than about 1.5 heads. Now, in addition to being small, babies are generally non-threatening, and they have a lot of what's called baby fat. This is usually translated into the chibi form with a lot of rounded and stubby shapes, but I'm going to take this just a little bit further. Rule number 2 is to use stubby teardrop shapes within your character's body and their shape language. The head is already fairly round, but if you use a tapered bean shape for the body and stubby arms and legs that either taper in or out, you're going to get that desired chibi silhouette. So in review of rule number 1 and 2, between Isabelle from Animal Crossing and the common human shape that's used in most Funko Pop figures, are both of these characters chibi? Well, no. Both have large heads, but the change in the pop is only proportional. The body is fairly normal, with slender, long limbs, and if you were to shrink the head down far enough, you'd have just a normal character. Rule number 3 is to adapt those cute baby-like features into our chibi characters. Now, this includes things like large eyes, a rounding of the features in general, a push of the facial features toward the bottom of the face, and usually something like a reduction or rounding of the chin. Rule number 4 is to amplify and simplify. Most chibi characters have a very simple amount of shape detail, and they draw attention to things like the face, and something like the hands, the feet, and a prop of some sort. So let's take a look at some examples of what is and isn't chibi, and purposefully only a handful of these things are actually anime, but I want to show you that these rules can apply to other things as well. First up, Vanellope von Schweetz. Is she chibi? Yeah, she is. She has the proportions. The body is about 1.5 heads tall. There's a lot of tapering in the limbs, and of course very childlike features, and all of that's pretty easy considering she's already a child. Going back to Animal Crossing, all of the characters as a whole, yes, largely the characters in Animal Crossing can be considered chibi. Even though there isn't so much tapering in most of the bodies, there's still very stubby limbs, and of course the proportions of the head totally match up. Now, Chibi Robo has the name Chibi in the name, but is he actually chibi? Well, in the sense of the original Japanese word, he is a little robot, but in terms of the character design proportions, no, he actually isn't. You look at him and he's got a bad case of lanky bod. Now, that's not an indictment of the character, it's not false advertising in any way, but in our understanding of chibi, he doesn't really quite make the cut. I had to come to the store for this. I don't own this game. How much is this? Alright. So yeah, I went ahead and got this on clearance, but I also drew a Chibi Robo, one that actually has the proportions that we've been talking about. And I kind of like them. Are these Mighty Mug figures chibi? Yeah, they are, and they're actually an example of what we haven't shown much of so far, which is a taper that's out. So most of our characters have had feet that are tapering in, but we see these legs tapering out, and it's a pretty cool look. It's very empowering, and the importance is drawn to, of course, the head, the hands, and the feet. If you've ever seen these Good Smile Nendoroid figures, I mean, these are very quintessentially chibi. I mean, you've got down to the anime facial features, you've got the tapering of the limbs. I mean, everything's there. And they're really reasonably priced. Is Alomar from the Pikmin games chibi? Absolutely he is, and the really cool part about Alomar is that he's not necessarily human, but he is actually an adult with a wife and kids back home, and yet still this chibi style comes across. And you don't necessarily consider him to be youthful because there's actually a reduction in the size of the eyes that we actually don't see much of unless he's super surprised. Is Voltron chibi? No. Moving on to a couple other contenders from the Smash Brothers series, these guys really toe the line of being chibi. I think between Lucas and Ness, you've definitely got the chibi style down. The body is about 1.5 heads tall on the character. Mega Man, not so much. It just sort of depends on the interpretation of Mega Man that you've got. If you go to the PSP game Mega Man Powered Up, there you will see what is absolutely a chibi version of the character. So now that we've looked at how to make chibi characters and some examples of existing ones, let's make one ourselves. We're going to use the Goodwin character from the last few videos, the real-time character design series. But first, here's one that I made ahead of time. Now on the left here is my character Parcel from a comic that's coming out soon, and here is the chibi version of her that I was able to put together. Very baby-like in her features, of course very simplified overall. The character is eager in the first place, so a lot of that lended itself to a chibi version pretty well. Now, don't worry, we are back to time-lapsing artwork, and what I'm doing right now to create a chibi version of our Goodwin character is blocking out some rough shapes and keeping in mind all of that criteria that we just considered when it comes to creating chibi characters. And I'm keeping her very simple and looking to push the pose as much as I can. Now, what's cool about this character and chibi characters in general is that we can make the facial features bigger, we can make them more simplified, and therefore the expressions that we give them can be more outlandish and really cartoony. So with this character, I did a couple of little poses there of her leaning on the cane, nothing really great until I got to this point where I really pushed the curve of her spine and really made sure the weight was coming forward on the cane. And as soon as I had that pose down, that face came together and it was just perfect. The expression here honestly captures the mood and personality of the character, I think even more potently than that illustration on the left does. Now, a little bit of background, if you didn't watch the real-time character design series, it's perfectly fine. It's like 4 hours. This character is a scout bard who is a vagabond. She's a street urchin, but she wears gaudy clothes that she finds and thinks very highly of herself despite being extremely poor. So her facial expression here, where she's kind of looking down on you, it just totally nails the idea for me. So I enlarged that simple sketch there and went back over it with a little bit of a finer brush, but still trying to make those proportions work and fiddling with the eyes a little bit to see what I can do with the shape of them, even though we're keeping very simple shapes overall. And again, very rounded shapes too. This is not a character that we want a lot of sharp edges on. And that's something too, even if you're creating a chibi version of a character that's supposed to be imposing and scary and covered in spiky armor and fire and stuff, as long as you have those childlike proportions, it's still going to come across as very non-threatening in a way, or at least sort of a contradiction in that way, there's a lot of charm to that kind of character. Now, in the original version of this character, the illustration there on the left, there's a lot more detail in things like the wrapping of the skirt and the legs and things like detail in the fabric up top. But you see, what I do is just distill those elements down into something that just reads enough like what it's supposed to be and not adding a ton of extra detail. Still though, if you wanted to add a lot of detail, that's perfectly fine. I think as long as you keep the silhouette and the overall shapes very simple, you can add in tiny intricate details and you'll still get that same chibi read. Goodwin has a little animal companion there who is an alley griffin named Wretch, and I kind of phoned it in on this chibi version of him. Like, I've drawn cute stuff before. I'm not crazy happy about him, but hey, I kind of did like 2.5 illustrations on this video already, so I'm happy with it. I play around a little bit with the hair here because the hair is supposed to be unkempt. It's supposed to be something that she can't take care of because she lives on the streets. But then you also want it to have that cute chibi nature to it, simplified. It isn't really laying flat in the picture on the left, so that's up to interpretation as well. And overall, I landed on something that allowed that silhouette on the front there, what's coming out from the eye and the cheek, that I wanted to really retain. But I also wanted to make sure that the crossbow with the flute scope on it that goes on her back wasn't messing with the hair too much. Next, I start to block out the overall color silhouette of the character, and then from there break that down into individual color shapes. And from there, I don't need to do a ton of extra rendering. Just like the parcel that I showed you earlier, this chibi style, it's so simplified and rounded, you can afford to really render with just simple, soft shadows and lights. Overall, I'm really happy with how this chibi version of Goodwin turned out, and like, just the facial expression alone, I'm just so pleased with. I really hope that this video has been helpful for you. If it has, I would love it if you could share it with a friend, someone who wants to draw chibi characters or who is interested in translating their existing characters into a chibi style. Another thing that I've been asking recently has become a bit of a necessary evil here on YouTube, which is to click the bell next to the subscribe button to actually get notified when new videos I make go up. The sooner more people see videos that I make, the more people tend to see them in the long term, and that would be really helpful for me to continue making more videos in the future and, you know, getting them out to more people. If you'd like to support me and this channel even more, you can go to patreon.com/bageldenizen and get a ton of things in return, like at the Novice Bard tier, a personalized video critique of your work from me, which is a great way to level up your art skills. My username is bageldenizen across Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch, and when I'm not getting inexplicably shadow banned on Instagram, it's a great way to see new art from me as it comes out. And of course, if you're not already subscribed here on YouTube, I'm making 2 new videos a week on Character Design Forge. Thank you so much for watching, and have fun creating!